Ageneto they parevomenon himon is prosevhin. And came to pass of our going unto prayer. So another day, the first day they met Lydia. So now another day of going unto prayer. Pediskin tina ekusan pneuma pithonos. Upon tise imas. A certain maidservant having pneuma of pithonos, an invisible power, is what the meaning of this word is. Spirit's a horrible word to use. An invisible power of pithonos. I have Python, but I think I originally used that from the King James because that was the name it was given. But I've done more studies on this, and I've seen that basically pitho, where you see the P epsilon theta omega, is the name of Delphi by Homer, the original name for Delphi, where the Delphi oracle originated. So Pitho is a place, and it was the main place of worship of the god Apollo in Greek mythology, which had many gods. It contained the temple of Apollo and a cave sort of structure that apparently emitted fumes that the priestess Pythia of Apollo would breathe. She'd breathe these fumes, and then she would speak an oracle in prose, speak it out, which would be put into hexameter verse by the priest and given to the people that were paying to have this oracle. It was the home of the Pan-Hellenic Pythian Games held every 4 years as the Olympics, one of the Pan-Hellenic Games. And the celebration was over Apollo's victory over the serpent Python. So this woman had some type of a special invisible power, demonic power over certain things to get people to listen to what she has to say. It says, Etis ergation polin parike tis kyries avtis kan mantevomeni, which she furnished much work to her masters, divining oracles. So she would make money for these men who were having her go out and do these, sort of like today's fortune tellers. There's one right down the street from me, a man who's got a sign out front, and he'll deliver an oracle to you if you want. And the 3132, the divining oracles, Montevomeni. In Deuteronomy 18:10, we're told, there shall not be found in you one purging his son or his daughter in fire, or one using oracles for divination, or one prognosticating and foretelling, which this woman was doing. It wasn't with the Jews, though, of course. It was in Greece. In 1 Samuel 28:8, it says, and this is King Saul, he said to her, use oracles indeed for me by the delivering an oracle, and lead up to me whomever I should tell you. And he wanted Samuel to come back from the dead, tell him if he was going to die or live through this next battle that he was going to go through. In verse 17, Avti kata koluthisa to Pavlo, and she, having followed closely after Paul, Keimin, and us. So here there's more than one person with Paul, more than one with outside of Silas. And Ekraze Legusa cried out, saying, Uti e anthropi thuli tu theou tu ipsistu isin. These men are bondmen of the God, the highest. Itines katagelusin imin odon soterias, who shall announce to us the way of deliverance. Now, some people would say, well, this is good. She's telling them about Jesus and how to acquire deliverance. But it's interesting that the message is correct, but it's delivered in the wrong way by someone who is not a Christian, who is doing it to make money, in his case, being pushed into doing it probably by a demon of some sort. Reminds me of the story of the seven sons of Sceva, priest, and his sons went in to cast out a demon of a man, and the man said something, Paul I know, and Peter I know, but who are you? And he went after him, one person, and they all fled naked from his house. So if God is not behind this action, which he wasn't here, then bad news. And she, all of a sudden it says, tuto de epi polas imeras. And this she did for many days, the ponithis de o Pavlos. And Paul, having been worked up, ke epistrepsas, and having turned to pneumati, ipe, said to the spirit, to this unseen force that she had, parangelo im si in to onomati Isu Christu, exelthin aptis, I summon to you in the name of Jesus Christ to come forth from her. Now, I've seen people who have went out, told people about Jesus, and they're like homeless type of people, and other people look at them and they think of, well, if that's supposedly a Christian, I don't think I want anything to do with it. A bad witness. We don't want to be bad witnesses to Christ. We want to be good witnesses. Another man I knew, he would go and hand out flyers, or not flyers, those little pamphlets telling people about Jesus, but he was just doing it to see how many he could give out. And he would just push them in people's face. And they didn't like that. And another place was a captured audience where I was waiting to get on a cable car in San Francisco, and everybody was cordoned off who would pay the price to get on it. You wouldn't want to leave because you'd lose your money in every place in the line. But here this man's shaking a Bible at everybody and yelling and making a scene. This also happens today. Seen it. So saying the correct thing in the wrong way, we don't want to do that. So Paul summons the demon, unclean spirit, to come out of her. Ke exilthen av ti ora. And it came forth the same hour. So apparently she was walking around doing this, but something happened where she apparently ceased. In verse 19, Idon tes they e kyrie avtis oti exilthen e elpis tis ergasias avton, and her masters, having seen that the hope of their work went forth, they're losing money now, having taken hold of Paul, epilavomene ton Pavlon, ke ton Silan and Silas, il kison istin agoran epitus archontas. They drew them unto the market, unto the rulers. So they grab a hold of these men and off they go to the rulers. Do something about it because they've lost money. In verse 20, ke prosagagontes aptus tis strategis, and leading them forward to the commandants. Now, a commandant is strategos is a Greek term, military term, for a leader of the military. And it says, and they said, Uti e anthropi ektarasusin imon tin polin. These men disturb our city. Now, it wasn't a real big city. The picture of the ruins is in the last section. Iudei eparchontes, being Jews. So here we see the Jews in the negative connotation to the people of the Greeks. Now, they had many gods, polytheistic. And here the Jews were monotheistic. There's only one God. And this is the God that they taught. And it didn't go over well, probably, with all these people that wanted these mythological polytheistic gods like Apollos and so forth. And it says in verse 21, Ke katan gelusin ethi auk existin imin paradekasthe. And they announced customs which are not allowed for us to welcome. Ude pien Romei usi, nor to do, being Romans. Now, this was a Roman colony. It wasn't a Greek city. A Roman colony was where this land was given to veterans of the Roman army, and they built these little, what they called colonies for them to live in. And then verse 22, Ke synepesti o oklos kat afton, and rose up together the multitude against them. So a lot of people now are being riled up by these men and the commandants. Ke strategi peririxantes ta imatia afton, and the commandants, having torn off their garments, ekelevson rav zizin, to be beaten with a rod. Then verse 23, Polas te epithentes aptis pligas, and having placed upon them many strokes, Evelon is philakin. They threw them into prison, so beaten and now thrown into this dark prison. Paran gilantes to desmophilaki asphalos tirin aftus, having exhorted the jailer to keep them safely. So if he didn't keep them safely, bad things are going to happen to him, maybe death. In verse 24, os hu parangelion tiaftin ilifos, having received such exhortation, Evelon aftus is tin esoteron philakin, cast them in the inner prison where they're really secure. Ketus podas avton is phalisato is to xylon, and safeguarded their feet in wooden stocks. So now their legs and feet are all tied up and they're in this inside bad place to be. But what? Verse 25, Katave to mesuniktion Pavlos ke Silas prosevhomeni emnu to theon, ton theon. Midnight, but towards midnight, Paul and Silas were praying, singing praise to God. Epikronto they avton ides me, and the prisoners heeded them. They're listening to what they're having to say. In verse 26, Afno they seismos ageneto megas, and suddenly a great earthquake took place. Seismos, we have a seismic, comes from that word. Oste salevthine ta themelia to desmoteriu, so as to shake the foundations of the jail. Now, in 619 AD, an earthquake actually destroyed Philippi. So earthquakes were apparently common here. In Antioch Thisan te parakrima e thire passe. And immediately all the doors were opened. Kepantata desma anethi, and all the bonds were unfastened. So this shaking apparently unloosened the wooden stocks, fell, and apparently they weren't hurt, and they could have left. And exipnos, they genomenos, odesmophilax, and the jailer, having been awakened out of sleep with this shaking, keidon aneogmenas tas theras tis philakis, and having beheld the doors of the prison having been opened, he sees this, oh, they're gone. You look in there, why would they stay? And spasamenos macharon, and having unsheathed his sword, emelan iapton anarin, he is being about to do away with himself by falling on the sword. Nomizon ek pefevgene tus thesmius, thinking the prisoners to have fled. In verse 28, Ephonis they phoni megali o Pavlos, and Paul, with a great voice, spoke out, legon, saying, me then paraxis siaptok kakon apates, you legon, me then paraxis siapto kakon. You should not exact hurt on yourself. Apantes gar esmen enthade. We are all together here from the inside. Right, we're here. It's dark and couldn't see. So it says in 29, etisas they phota, then having for lights, isepidise, he rushed in, takes a light and rushes in, and tromos genomenos, and having become trembling because he thought he was going to lose his life, prosepase to Pavlo ke to Sila, he fell before Paul and Silas. They didn't leave. What? Verse 30, ke proagagon aptus exo, and having led them outside, so he brings them out, he said, Kyrie, masters, time the pein ina sotho. What is necessary for me to do that I should be delivered? Because he was preaching the deliverance of Jesus Christ, because that's what it mentioned with by the woman with the spirit of Pitho. In verse 31, ide ipon, and they said, Paul and Silas, Pistevson, believe, epiton Kyrion Isun Christon, upon the Lord Jesus Christ, ke sothine, and you will be delivered. Si ke o ikosu, you and your house. Well, who is this Jesus Christ? I'm sure he was wondering. In verse 32, ke elalisan avto ton logon to Kyriou, and they spoke to him the word of the Lord. Now, what they spoke to him, what Paul had, I don't know if he had any writings of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, or any of them, probably some of the Old Testament, but he was able to tell this man what he needed to hear. Ke pasitis and to Ikea aftu, and to all the ones in his house. They all heard the story, just as Cornelius did with Peter. Ke paralavon aftus in akini ti ora tis niktos, and having taken them in that hour of the night, elusan apo ton pligon, he bathed them from their strokes. ke evaptisti avtos, and he was immersed, ke avtu Pontus, and all of his, I put his family there, at least that's what it's talking about, parakrima, immediately, anagagon te avtus is to ikon avtu, and having led them into his house, parethika trapezon, he placed a table with food on it, ke igalia sato paniki, and he exalted with his whole family, pepistevkos to theo, having believed in God. And emeris they genomenes, but they having become apestilon e strategitus rabdhukus, the commandments of the lictors sent, saying, now these lictors, they 4465, they were tied to the commandants. They were specialized Roman civil servants. They were the attendants as a bodyguard to these commandants, and they carried the fasces, which we know from the fascists of the Nazis and Spain, and Italy, which were all fascists in the 40s during the Second World War, which was a bundle of rods tied with an axe in it, which is a sign that they had, the fasces, of power. And it says they cleared the paths for the commandants and the officials, protected the officials, and even executed the penalties, probably beating Paul and Silas. So they come and saying, apolison tus anthropus akinus, release those men to the Philippian jailer. In verse 36, pingile they, o desmophilax, tus logus tutus, pros ton pavlon. And the jailer reported these words to Paul, oti apostol kasin e strategi ina apolithite, that the commandants have sent that you should be released. Nin un exelthontes, now then, having gone forth, porevus they in Irene, go in peace. So the Philippian jailer told them. But 37 then said, O they Pavlos, ephi prosavtus, but Paul said to them, probably the lictors, or whoever, Viorantes imas thimosia, they having flayed us in public, akata crintus anthropus Romeus, eparchontas, uncondemned men being Romans, and remember they were in this Roman colony. It says, Evalon is philakin, they cast us into prison. Kenin, lathra imas ekvalusin, and now in private they're casting us out? Ugar, for no. Allah elthontes avti imas exagagetosan, but having come, let them lead us out themselves. Verse 38, Aningilon they tis strategis e ravduki, and the lictors announced to the commandants, Tarima tatavta, these words, Kefo vithisan, akusantes oti Romei isi, and they feared, having heard that they're Romans. Now they're going to be in trouble. Could be. Verse 39, Ke elthontes, and having come, parakalasan aftus, they appealed to them, begging them probably not to cause them any problem. Ke exagagontes, and having led them out, eroton, exelthin tis polios, they ask them to go forth out of the city, probably nicely, please leave. exelthontus they ek tis philakis, then having gone forth from out of the prison, esielthon pros ten Lydion. And having gone forth from the prison, they entered to Lydia, who had the house there. Ke idontes tus adelphus, and having seen the brothers, so apparently other people had become believers. They were called the brethren. Parakalasan avtus, they comforted them. Ke exilthon, and they went forth, Paul and Silas. And now the next section, Paul and Silas in Thessalonica.